Okay, here we go. This is part 3 of the Great Drascombe Adventure. Mark has safely been returned to the bosom of his family. I'm back on my own again, and I've got about another week or so to go. Time to perhaps still do a bit more detouring, but then obviously we need to end the week by getting back to the Sound of Mull and finishing the circumnavigation. I should mention at this point, by the way, my big goal about not using the outboard was doing well. We had used the outboard a little bit getting in and out of Oronsay and getting alongside the jetty to pick up water and such like. But I think I've managed to keep the usage down to minutes really rather than hours. Hopefully, I'll be able to keep this up for the next week. We'll see how it goes. Well, we had a decent southwesterly. It started off quite gentle and built as the day went on. And really, my thought was once I came out of Oronsay Harbour was, well, let's see how far up the coast of Skye I can get in one day. And then if, for example, I could get as far as Loch Bracadale, then maybe there was an outside chance I could get all the way round the Isle of Skye and back again before the end of the week. A long shot, but it was worth a go. I don't have any footage of this trip beyond this picture, at least until we arrived at our eventual destination. But the wind filled in as the day went on, built up to a lovely breeze, lots of sunshine. It was a fantastic day sailing, but started to die off as the afternoon wore on. And in the end, I decided to head into Loch Einort. Not an ideal place to stop, but very pretty nonetheless. Bit hard to tell what's going on today. Didn't quite make it as far as I'd intended yesterday, so the ended up coming into this loch here, which is not ideal. The forecast yesterday was for a fairly fresh southerly, and I think that's what we've got outside. A bit hard to tell though because I'm tucked in underneath all of these hills here, but I don't think it's anything radical. So we'll go out and have a look. If it turns out not to be much good, we'll come back in again. Yeah, I'll go out prepared for the worst and hoping for the best. I really felt I needed to get out of Loch Einort because although today's forecast was for a southwesterly, the following day it was forecast to shift round to the west, and that would have made an anchorage here pretty untenable. I was really concerned about the wind funneling up between the sides of the loch. And I'd also already decided that I didn't have enough time to get all the way around the Isle of Skye. It was possible, I think, but I could have landed myself in having to drive and pick the boat up from somewhere other than Dunstaffnage. So I kind of made up my mind that I should start heading back towards Ardnamurchan. And that turned out to be a little bit more difficult than I imagined. I did think when I came out of the loch, with the wind being from the south as promised, that I might be able to lay canna. And I gave that a go, but it really didn't work. The waves were horrendous. There was a lot of chop. I think there must have been waves bouncing off the nearby cliffs. So they were probably 6 feet tall, but really, really close together. And the poor little Drascombe just didn't have the power to get through them. So after giving it a go for a couple of hours, I gave up and tacked and headed into Soay Harbour here. Well, morning in Soay Harbour, and very nice too. I think the wind's definitely shifted from where it was yesterday, which is going to make life easier. The question is how much of it there is. And looking outside, I can see some white caps out there, so it's not an oily flat calm by any means. So I think what I need to do is get ashore, get up that hill over there, see if I can get a signal, and also have a look out over the other side of the island and just see what it's like outside before committing to it. Because I think if it was absolutely blowing like stink out there, the only option I've got is to head downwind, and then I'm really committed to the roller coaster ride all the way to who knows where. So I'd rather only do that if I know that it's manageable. Otherwise, I'm quite safe and snug in here, so yeah, wouldn't be a disaster to spend another day here. So trying to work out where to get ashore, either there, a bit rocky, or there's a, might not be able to see it, but there's a ramp, slipway, something there, guarded by a very irate heron. So I'm thinking I'll probably just drop back on the anchor over there. Tide's dropping still for another half an hour or so, and see if we can get through these trees without being eaten alive by the Scottish Air Force. Let's give it a go. Change of oil. Scrub down, I think that'll be all right. What it is. Well, the little walk over the island allowed me to take a look at the sea, and yes, it looked good. The wind was probably a good force 5, I would think, maybe a touch more, but I was able to get some signal on the phone and get a weather forecast as well, and that looked reasonably promising. In fact, if anything, it was showing that this was going to be the last good day's sailing for a little while. So I decided to head off and was optimistic of getting as far as perhaps even Egg, maybe Muck. You are going to have to take my word for this, though, because it was too brisk to use either of the other cameras that I had. So I was relying entirely on the GoPro, and the memory card on that has decided to be a bum. So, yes, one of the best days sailing I've ever done. Cracking close fetch reach to between Rum and Egg. The wind got a bit sniddly in between the two for a while, but once I broke out of that, things looked good for Egg, and once I got to Egg, it looked terrific for Ardnamurchan, so I decided to go all out and head for Kilchoan rather than take a chance and stop on Egg and then find there'd be no wind to get me round Ardnamurchan the next day. Marvellous sail, good wind, big rolling waves coming into Ardnamurchan. It felt like I was sailing across the Atlantic. Yeah, terrific. But like I say, you're just going to have to take my word for it. When it's this calm, not much else you can do apart from eat. So far, managed to move about 150 yards today. Unfortunately, the tide against me is a bit stronger than my rowing, so we wait. Something might happen eventually. You never know. The view outside. So we went. Eventually, this breeze filled in from the west, so we headed up towards Loch Sunart. Had an idea that maybe we would end up in Loch Tecuis. I have no idea how that's meant to be pronounced, but it's written down below. I changed my mind though and decided to head into sailing more on Oronsay. Again, apologies for the pronunciation. But this is a truly delightful little anchorage. I'm reluctant to tell you all about it, to be honest, because I'd like to keep it for myself. No video here because I did shoot it all on the now defunct GoPro. I did go a little bit mad with the stills though, so enjoy this little lot. On the downside, I did feel the midges were perhaps a little larger and louder than they normally are. Well, this is fun. 4 o'clock in the morning, and it's got windy. It's all seem to be holding all right now, so haven't moved anywhere. But it's not exactly making sleep
very easy. Not an awful lot I can do at the moment. Just sit here and wait for it to blow itself out, I suppose.
The wind didn't really ease overnight, so got up, got going. Wasn't really sure what to expect. It seemed like the wind was funneling into the anchorage where I was. So took the cautious approach and headed out with just the jib and the mizzen up. And the idea was to see what it was like outside. If it looked terrible outside, then I could pop across to Loch Allen. If it didn't, then I'd carry on. Having 3 sails on a coaster can be a real benefit, but sailing single-handed, it can sometimes turn into a little bit of a handful. And I ended up with a very, very busy hour and a quarter or so as I sort of emerged from the bay where I had anchored and headed out into the Sound of Mull. So initially I was sailing out with just the jib and the mizzen. Got to the corner where that little spur of road comes down to the coast. That's where the ferry terminal is. And the wind there was gusty, fluky, but it was by no means too bad. And so I decided after a while that the main should go up and we'd make a lot better progress if it did. So it went up. I can't remember if I put the whole thing up or whether I put it up with a single reef in or not. But either way, it ended up with a single reef in very shortly afterwards. And while I was faffing around doing this, I realised I hadn't tied down one of my oars, and it just slid over the side and disappeared into the Oggin, meaning that I had to do a little sail round and round in circles to try and pick the wretched thing up. Didn't really want to lose it. And all this while holding up the Loch Allen to Fishnish ferry as it was passing from Fishnish towards Loch Allen. I actually think the fellow was hanging around waiting to make sure I wasn't in trouble. So I was quite grateful that he was there. Managed to get the oar back. Cheery wave to the captain of the ferry, and headed off again. But the further out I got into the channel, the windier it got, and in the end, I had to settle. Yeah, I had to just basically keep stopping and reefing, and got a reef down, and in the end settled on double reefed main, not an awful lot of jib at all, and the mizzen up. With the right reefs in, sail combination, the boat settled down and actually plodded along quite reasonably. It was very windy. The wind was being funneled up the Sound of Mull. It was pelting down with rain. I mean, it certainly wasn't a day to be out sailing, really. However, there were a lot of us out. There was a fairly substantial racing fleet. Gradually overtook us as we passed through the bottom end of the Sound of Mull. Consequently, I found myself sort of wanting to sort of keep near the edge to keep out of their way, and ended up in the rather rough sort of overfalls marked on the image here. It wasn't terrible; it was just bouncy and uncomfortable and wet. And looking ahead, I knew that there was yet more tidal activity further out at the end of Lismore Island and off the sort of corner of the Isle of Mull. So I decided to bail out and head up Loch Linney towards the top end of Lismore. Got a little bit too interesting out there, so I'm going to go round the other end of Lismore. There's 2 races to contend with. The tidal ones, but also I think it might be the Round Mull race. Just had a whole fleet of offshore boats come charging up behind me. One extra thing to think about. So I've eased sheets now. We're not bouncing around like we were before. go down the other end of Lismore, see what it looks like down there, and if possible, go back up the other side. And if that works, then we'll be in Dunstaffnage tonight. If it doesn't, I will sit around and wait at the end of this one until more favourable conditions arise. Getting round the top of Lismore was a lot less violent than the alternative route at the other end, but was still nonetheless problematic because by the time I got there, the tide had turned and was setting relatively strongly northeast. And of course, you know, the way it happens, the wind died. Not completely, but it certainly significantly eased off by the time I got there. So it took a couple of attempts to get through the narrows here. You can see the route of the first attempt, and I almost made it, but you know, one mistake and I would have been hitting something hard and geological, I think. So I bailed out, went round the back and up the wider channel, which turned out to be a bit easier. Not easy, but easier. And the wind eased and held at that lower strength for the next hour or two, I think, as we went up, beating up wind again, this time towards Dunstaffnage. Huge amount of rain coming out of the sky at this point, by the way. Very much looking forward to a hot shower at the marina. It's not 2 hours away yet, but looks forward. There was a final sting in the tail for this. I mean, I had a sort of relatively slow force 3 and very soggy beat up towards Dunstaffnage, but when I got to the point marked on the plotter here, my goodness, the wind filled back in again with you know, quite a bang actually. Ended up with the main down completely for a little while, just waiting for the squall to pass. Now it never really did. So I ended up, and you can see I lost some ground while I was drifting about, faffing around trying to get everything sorted, and ended up back down to a scrap of jib, double reefed main, and the mizzen for the final bit of the beat back. Yep, so all the sail pretty much was off, which was fine for the breeze that I had at the time. Of course, once I got into Dunstaffnage, the wind died again, and it did make the last sort of couple of 100 yards painfully slow. But we got there, and yeah, I was pretty pleased to be in. I was quite cold by this point, quite soggy. So yeah, it was a welcome end to the day's sailing. So nothing that a hot shower and a trip into town for a warm meal wouldn't cure. Pleasant night on the pontoon, and the next morning the boat was out the water, on the trailer, packed up, and trundling home to the sunny southeast of England. A terrific trip overall. I didn't get to see all the wildlife I wanted to see. Didn't see any basking sharks. That's been a while now, since many years since I've seen one of them. Possible sighting last year, but nothing confirmed. Didn't see any minke whales. Did see lots of porpoises and dolphins, and really delighted to see that guillemot and shearwater numbers seem to be back on the mend again. There were very, very few around when I was sailing the Wayfarer around here last year. But this year we were just starting to get those rafts of the birds forming, which is what I remembered from previous years of being up here. So absolutely delighted to see that. And yeah, that's it for this year. Next year we'll be back, I think, looking at the Caledonian Canal. So something slightly different to this one, and probably not single-handed. Anyway, there we go. Till the next time.